Coming to you straight from the Rio Grande and beyond. Broadcasting to the four corners of the globe. So grab your seat, your coffee, or your sundowner.
Okay, everybody, here we go.
On point, as always. This is Gloves Off. Gloves Off.
Wherever you call home, we are there. In favorite places. Large spaces. For many homes, we have coverage that fits the way you live. And with our home systems protection, you can cover major home appliances and more. We cover more type of homes than ever. Get the coverage you and your family deserves. For a free no obligation quote, visit us online or simply give us a call.
Back at you, Gloves Off, and I got a great guest and a great leader here in Texas, Texas State Representative Richard Raymond. We're going to touch base on hate speech, the assassination of Charlie Kirk, what happened earlier this morning in Dallas, those horrific events. And before we even get started, our condolences out to the Kirk family, his friends, and those hurt in Dallas as well. And, I think everybody has to kind of sit down and have some meditation prayers or whichever way you all do it, because we need to kind of stop this nonsense. And I think it's going to take everybody all together. How are we doing today, Representative? You doing good?
Doing good. I'm here at the Texas Capitol. I had a couple of meetings up here. I held back to Laredo in a couple of days, but there's a lot going on right now, and you started to reference it with the recent events of the shooting of Charlie Kirk, who was basically pretty active politically, of course, and very conservative, and specifically formed an organization to go out to college campuses. And he formed it when he was 18 years old, which is pretty impressive when you think about it. And my understanding is he had organizations or he had chapters in about 800 campuses around the country. So he was by now a big presence for them. And so the assassination, I think just was something that shocked so many of us, so many people. And I think as a result of that, here we are today, sort of in the forefront, discussing this issue of political speech, discussing the issue of disagreeing or agreeing with that speech, how we as a society handle that, and what we do to move forward. I like what you said at the beginning, that I think we all have to come together in our attitude about these kinds of issues. Where the shooting of Charlie Kirk, or today as we're recording this, there was an ICE detention facility in Immigration Customs Enforcement facility in Dallas that somebody got up on a building across the street and started shooting at it indiscriminately at the building, and then at the bus of detainees that was pulling up to the facility. I know several people were hurt. I don't know all the numbers. I know that one or two people have passed away, were killed. I think one was killed, others injured, and then the shooter, again, the early reports, the shooter then took his own life. So I wish we could be talking more about the economy and other things that are going on that are so important to so many lives. But this is in the forefront, and I think it's important that we do talk about this.
Absolutely. Representative, we're sitting on a powder keg. It's kind of like the old cowboy movies where they put the trail out and they light the fuse. But this time we're not sitting up in the hill. We're sitting on the powder keg and we're watching this go down. And we need to put a stop to this. Whether it happened long ago when they initially ignited it, and I think that hate speech, whatever it is, we've seen it start making people bolder and bolder. Back in the early 2010s, we had the hate. You can call them hate crimes, but then people say you can't because they're underprivileged youth. the knockout games of, the young blacks beating up elderly individuals coming out of grocery stores. And then it just escalated one after another. And then they started when our current president had his first term, everybody who wore a red hat was violently attacked, whether, it was in a Whataburger, like what happened to that young lad over in San Antonio, everywhere else. And nobody really quashed it. Everybody knew that it was wrong. But when you see this type of behavior, it just emboldens people to do a little bit more and more. And now we have the issues that we're getting now. And now we're out of hand. And I understand what we're going with the hate speech, but where's the fine line of freedom of speech to speech? Because speech is speech. Now, can a person be, I hate to use this word, an asshole? Yeah, there's plenty of them. Or is it a person, is it a threat? And there's a difference between a threat, like saying, I'm going to do this to you specifically, and it's that will be taken as a difference. But where are we? And I think that's a committee that they placed you in, right? You're vice chair of a specific committee that will just form for that. Can you explain that?
Yes, and let me say, just recent history in recent years. I mean, while I've been in the legislature, whether it's like it sort of cuts across the lines, Paul, because James Byrd, some people won't even know that name, but James Byrd was a black man, a military veteran, by the way, in Jasper, Deep East Texas, and he was accosted by, I think, 3 individuals, if I remember, white, and they tied him to the bumper of the truck, and they dragged him, driving the truck at high speed till he just died, and his body started falling apart. I mean, it was a form of torture and ultimately a murder. And those guys, I think, got the death penalty. And that's where there was a lot of attention brought to the term hate crimes. We had Matthew Shepard up in Wyoming, a skinny kid, a young man who was gay, and he was beaten and then tied to a fence post in the middle of the night out in the country and froze to death after they'd beaten him up. And then from there to today, to your point, whether it was, you'd hear some people, like you said, I think during the first term of Trump as president, wearing some hats and being accosted or attacked or insulted or beat up or whatever. And then again, you see it cuts across all the lines. And I think, what I've started to say, and maybe I've been saying it for a long time, is that, what we need to do is be passionate first and foremost, be passionate about following the law. And what the law in our country, I think that most people agree is it's good, is that we don't kill people. It's whether it's if you're religious, it's going to be in your religion, especially I would say as a Christian, as I am, that not to kill. I voted for a bill, and I was a joint author on a bill this session to put the 10 Commandments in all our school districts and all our school classrooms across the state of Texas. I got some pushback on that, but what I said is, these basic tenets that you see in the 10 Commandments are things that if we start telling kids at the very beginning of their learning, that these are some things you shouldn't do. You should not kill. You should not steal. You should honor your parents. Basic things that in life, whether you're religious or not, basic things that are good. And I think we as a society, even if you're against putting the 10 Commandments in classrooms, right? I'm for it. But if you're against it, I don't think you can disagree. And I think most people would not disagree with the commandment that says, thou shalt not kill. And so I think, Paul, that what we need to make a push right now is make a really big push to say, let's all unite behind the things that we agree on. And what we agree on is that you should not kill somebody because they say something that you don't agree with. I mean, if that were the case, can you imagine that, the passions that we've seen? I mean, my gosh, Paul, I've been to a Dallas Cowboys game, my son and I, when we were playing the Giants, back when the Giants were good. And there's some guys in front of us, or the guy in front of us was his girlfriend, and he was wearing a Giants jersey. And then a couple of guys that were sitting not too far from me, they got real drunk and they started being really obnoxious. I mean, really obnoxious. And these guys ended up getting into a fist fight. There's blood all over the place for fighting, on something like that. We have to move away from that. That guns are not the answer to disputes, whether it's a political dispute, whether it's an argument about who's the best football team or who's the best president. You shouldn't ever get it to that level. And we should agree on that, so that if we start from that common understanding fundamentally of what we believe in our society, which I believe we do believe in our society, which is why it's against the law to kill people in the United States, because we as a society have said, this is not what we want. We have to bring a focus back to that, Paul, and that's part of what I want to do. The Speaker of the House appointed a committee the other day to look at civil discourse and free speech on university campuses, university and college campuses in the state of Texas. He named me vice chairman of the committee. He called me and asked me if I would do this. I said, absolutely. And as we start those hearings, which I think we'll probably start next month, and we'll do some in Austin. I'm guessing we'll do some in campuses across the state. And I want to bring some focus to what we agree on, because if we can start there, then everything else is okay. Go argue to the end of the earth how strongly you believe on certain issues. The other side can live with it. And that's what we want. We want the other side to live with it. Whatever you argue, that's a good way of saying it, Paul. Whatever you argue and however passionate you are about your position on any issue, I don't care what it is, it doesn't matter what it is. What you have to be comfortable with is that the other person, the other side, can live with it, not die with it, but live with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But, are we so far past that line to bring it back? I don't know.
Yes. Well, we can. Yeah. I think we can. This is a great country. This is a great country with great resolve. We have, through our history, been through so many things, Paul. And I think that we can move that needle back, correct that needle back to where, I'm going to give you an example. Many years ago, before I was in office, this was back when the first Bush was running for president. And I was a young guy, and the University of Texas, they called, I was supporting the Democratic ticket. The vice presidential candidate was Senator Lloyd Bentsen from Texas. I worked for him. I had worked for him. I respected him tremendously. And so they called and asked me, said, hey, there's going to be a debate on the campus at the University of Texas. It is being put together by the University Republicans and the University Democrats together. Those two groups got together. The University of Texas Republicans, the University of Texas Democrats got together and together hosted a presidential debate, and they asked for surrogates. So then they asked me if I'd be willing to go be the surrogate, which I accepted. And it was great because we had the two moderators up there with the president of the Republicans, the president of the Democrats, and they sort of took turns asking the questions. And it was great. And it was a great debate. I enjoyed it tremendously, and I never forgot it. And I never forgot how they came together and hosted it together, and how, although there were some issues that we disagreed on for sure, but it was so civil, and it was passionate but civil, and that at the end of it, everybody in that room, Democrats and Republicans, we all shook hands. It was okay, And then, by the way, in the election, my candidates lost, right? My candidates lost, their candidates won. Okay,
But that's the way it should be, and we continue moving forward and changing things. And you need people that's wonderful that they placed you in that committee. I'm going to tell you why, because you're one of the ones that's level-headed and has a conscience of bringing people together. You're not afraid of crossing the aisles and shaking hands with somebody and working together. Many on both sides don't want to work with the other side. They're split. They don't even want to talk to them. And that's when we get into trouble. When we have that type of close-minded attitude. And I think that close-mindedness resonates throughout the right now. It's such divided that you see it even inside police departments, the city departments, educational facilities. You have that division. There's no more bringing everybody together, and it has to start then. And then
let me give you another example. So last year, the Texas Public Policy Foundation, it's based in Austin, it's a research organization, pretty much push conservative policies, and I would just call them conservative. I wouldn't call them crazy, just conservative. They're conservative policies. So they call me, they were going to do a panel discussion on the border security and so forth. And so they asked me, because obviously being from Laredo and so forth, and I've been a rep for a long time, would I come and participate? I said, absolutely. And they said, really? Oh, we don't get a lot of Democrats, coming. I said, if you invite me, I'll come. So I went, and we got up there, and we had a moderator, and then, we were answering questions. Then we started taking questions from the audience. And at some point, even though, I made the point, say, for example, I have voted for every single border security funding bill that's come up since it started back with Governor Perry, a long time ago. I said, I've always supported that, because I know that in Laredo, security means something to us. I said, there's a big difference when it comes to security between Laredo and Nuevo Laredo. And you know what that difference is? It's law enforcement. I said, so I've always supported, and I'm always going to support border security funding. And then at some point, then the issue of the wall came up. I said, I don't support building the wall. I don't think it's going to get you what you need. I don't think that's not the policy that gets us there. And I pushed other policies like getting work permits, which I think is a real answer. And I talked about that. Well, then when we took questions from the audience, this one lady raised her hand. Oh, look, there's some new material that you can use for the wall. It doesn't cost as much, and it's even more effective. Okay, all right. Then this other guy stands up and he said, oh, Representative, I really like your position on a lot of these things, but I'm for the wall, and you got to be for the wall. I said, well, no, sir, I'm not for the wall. I don't want a wall right there cutting Laredo, right downtown Laredo and all that. I said, I don't think that's going to get you anything, and it's going to cost so much money. We could use that money on other things. And he said, but look, no, I think if you think about it. And I said, sir, let me tell you something. I said, I've thought about it a lot. And I said, now look, you're in favor of the wall and I'm against it, but that's okay. This is exactly the way I said it, Paul. I said, but that's okay. You can be in favor of it. I can be against it. And that's okay. We don't have to agree on everything. We agree on some things. And then I kind of lighthearted, I go, but if you're going to build it, you need to talk to this lady over here that's talking about some other material that they could use that costs less and is more effective. So y'all need to get together, because if you're going to build it, maybe you need to talk to this lady, Well, anyway, so then he kind of laughed. He goes, okay. I said, but it's okay. We can disagree. We can't agree on everything. That's just not the way life works. And then this is what I love. I was telling this story last week to one of my buddies in Laredo, who's a Republican. And I said, and I told him we didn't need to walk. And I said, let me tell you something. Today, which was like last Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever day it was, about a week ago, I said, I just heard President Trump on the radio, on satellite radio, saying that for the second month in a row, we have had 0 illegal crossings for the second month in a row. And I looked at my friend and I said, you know what that means? I said, that means I was right. We don't need the wall. I said, so I think I made my point. We don't need the wall, man, because Trump just announced it for the second month in a row, 0 illegal crossings. But parale, we're about to spend billions of dollars on that wall. Man, there's a lot of stuff we could do with that money. And anyway, it gets back to this, that we should debate about, how we, how what I've said, Paul, I'm going to sidetrack a little bit. But what I have said, and I believe it, is that we need to tie immigration policy to our economic needs in this country. And if we do that, because they are tied in together, brother. We have so many people in hotels and restaurants, construction sites, landscaping. I mean, I can tell you, brother, I had one of my friends who started his own lawn, did very, very well in the oil field industry, sold his company, made a lot of money, but he was still young. So he started another company in Houston. They do landscaping. And so he was telling me that it's a $13 billion a year industry in this country, landscaping. And he was telling me, and most of the guys that work there, they're not from the United States. He said, we can't get workers here. So anyway, that's a side note, but still, the point is, we can agree and disagree and not shoot each other.
Absolutely. But now, what do you think would be a good solution for what happened? Because number one, it goes into safety. it goes into college police. They drop the ball. Another part, you know what I'm saying? There's a lot of
Yeah.
stuff in there we can go to, but it still doesn't stop the eminent hate that we have, and that
Well,
eminent hate.
I think that, look, Paul, I think I've told you, so July of last year, 2024, I'm in Austin that Saturday. It was a Saturday. And all of a sudden my phone starts blowing up that they shot President Trump, then former President Trump. And, I start, talking to people and I get the details and, I don't like some of the responses I'm getting from people about what happened. So the next morning I came to the Capitol and I ordered a resolution that said, a resolution denouncing the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump and all political violence. That's what my resolution said, and all political violence. I wrote it in July of last year. I wasn't, you can't introduce the bills until right after the election. So in November of last year, I introduced it. And so I felt very strongly then, as I do now, that I don't care who it is. I don't care. I don't care if I don't agree with them even 1% of the time. Although I've never found anyone that I don't agree with at least 1% of the time. You're going to there's a lot of common ground, what I've found through the years, Paul. And that's why I work with everybody, because there's a lot of common ground, no matter who you're dealing with. But no matter who I disagree with, that you can't, violence cannot be the solution. It's not it can't be the go-to. It's if you don't agree with somebody, then go work harder than them. If you didn't like Charlie Kirk, you know what? Start your own organization, go to college campuses, go argue your viewpoint, go debate your viewpoint, go try to, get more and more college students to agree with your point of view than he is getting students to agree with his point of view. That's what you do. That's what we encourage. I mean, but the reality is, getting to your point and to your question, is now, like I hate to say it, but I'm like, don't do any events outside. Don't do them outside, because it is, if somebody has bad intentions, to harm or to disrupt, it's easier for them to do it outside. That's what happened with Kirk. He was outside. And it sucks to say that, but that's just the reality until we can move past this period where you don't see that anymore. Look at Salman Rushdie, even inside. Salman Rushdie, who wrote, a book that so many Muslims hated him for, when he wrote about Islam. And it was just a novel that he wrote. I think it was just a novel. And they said they had a price on his head. Some of the radicals from the Middle East, like, I have several $1 million if you kill this guy. Well, they never did. But then finally, 2 or 3 years ago, he was on a stage at a campus as well. And that somebody jumped up there and stabbed him and, pretty close to killed him, left him permanently injured. So there's no 100% safe place. However, I think that, for one, you probably need to do stuff inside and, make sure that, make them bag-free events, I guess, because if you're going to walk in, you can't walk in with a bag. I mean, look, you go to a Dallas Cowboys game, you can't take bags in there, brother. You cannot take bags in there. And so we have to do those little things, Paul, to discourage somebody who wants to try to do something bad, and also just to help, keep those people, the participants and the audience members, safer.
No, you're correct. I think there's issues with holding events, which way we have to take it, how maybe the police has to get involved, law enforcement has to get involved, especially if it's going to be an event over a certain percentage of people that are going to go. You're going to have to need police presence, not just security. Police presence need to step in, and people need to understand that those how can I say, those security issues have to be met, and I think they have to be either placed by law for them to be followed. Because a lot of things, it's like, let's just go into a boxing event, you can't sell beer. You can't sell alcohol in a bottle. Why? Because the bottle flies, the cans fly. Everything has to be in a foam cup. The foam cup yeah, it's gonna fly, but it's not gonna fly that far, and it's not gonna hurt you as much, you know. So you have things that are already set into a parameter, and so for security purposes as well. So I think that what we have to do, especially because you can have an event, whatever kind of event, and the speaker comes in here, and then you can have somebody just dislikes them, has discord with them, and all of a sudden comes inside and does something terrible. That happens. What we haven't seen, we've seen political violence. We've always had that. That's always existed. But we've never had the assassinations of like a journalist, or in this sense, like Charlie Kirk, because he was more like a blogger kind of, wasn't a podcaster, even though he had his podcast. He was just an influencer as per se. You never had that type of crime or assassination attempt on that type of individuals. Not that I've heard of, but and not in this large scale.
Yeah, well, like I said, Salman Rushdie was one. If I think about it, I can probably give you some other examples. But I don't. But we've never, not in recent times, right, where we can think of someone that was assassinated, on a college campus like that, which is what he was doing was political debate. I mean, it was political debate. He was, like I said, very active within the Republican Party, worked very hard to campaign for President Bush. And so that's where he came from. So, and what I would say is, he was in there trying to change hearts and minds of young people on campuses to be involved politically, right? And obviously stressing his points of view. One of the things that I've always done, Paul, my whole career, and I do it to this day. If I'm invited to speak somewhere, or to go be on a panel, or to be in a situation where I can get asked questions, I mean, I do it, and I welcome it. You're going to hear me anytime I get in front of an audience where there's going to be the ability to ask questions, or where that's from the beginning, that's the setting. I always tell them, ask me whatever you want to ask me. I don't limit what you can ask me. Whatever you want to ask me, I'll do my best to answer it. Sometimes I can answer it. Sometimes I don't have the answer. I don't know the answer, and I'm not going to lie to you if I don't. But I'm never afraid of being in front of a crowd or a particular group. I've had people that I've known in politics that, don't go in front of that group because they're really tough. And I don't care. It's okay. I want to know what they're thinking. I want to know what they're hearing. I want to know what their logic is, because I learn from people. I always say this, Paul, we never stop learning. We never stop learning. So I learn just as much from a town hall meeting, or going in front of an association, or going in front of a group. And I can talk about something that they want me to talk about it. But just as importantly to me is that I want to hear from them. And I know I learn a lot from the questions that they ask, because a lot of times somebody will ask me a question and we'll start talking about it. And I'll say, well, tell me what you think about this. Maybe I want to know if you don't agree with that. Let me hear your point of view. And that was the kind of stuff that Charlie Kirk would do. If you've ever seen any of his, little videos, he would say, okay, tell me why you feel that way. Why do you feel that way? And I'll tell you why I feel this way. And then, he's trying to influence you through logic and through reasoning and through his strong belief, in Christianity and the Bible. And so what I try to do more than anything when I'm talking to people and answering questions, even more so than trying to convince them to change their position, I'm telling them where I come from. I'm telling them why I believe this or why I believe that. And then I want to know why they feel that way, right? And so it's not even so much that I'm trying to influence them, Paul. It's that I think we learn from each other, right? When you get into something, you learn from each other. And that, I think, is very, very valuable. And I think we have to put a very big, value to that, and say, learn from each other. Don't kill each other. That's not the way for society to progress.
And the harsh reality on his assassination is that the assassinated. Politics is one thing, but more so is that they assassinated a voice of Christianity, because he was out there talking about God back and forth, like you just said, and that to me is a sadness, because that we went back a couple of steps. instead of moving forward.
Well, for you and I as Christians, it is. But you know what? If he had been a high profile person that had a different religious belief than mine, or no religious belief at all, and was out there doing what Charlie was doing and then got shot, basically a public execution, I would be just as much against it as as I think this was terrible. I would think that would be terrible as well. I don't care what religions you are. I don't care who you are, because that's not who we as a society need to be. And if you, in our case, you and me, our religious belief, our faith, our Christianity really teaches us that that's not the way to go. It really isn't.
You know, that assassination was public, it was made public. It was, I don't know if it was to send a message to all of us, you guys better be on the watch. Or I don't know what it comes out with. I'm taking in a different, because I've done security in the past, especially in my younger years. Did a lot of protection, as you well know, and it kind of stopped me when that happened. It kind of stopped me in my tracks. I just started thinking, what happened? Where's it at? You don't want to go into all the rabbit holes that are going in there, but you want to study what happened for it not to happen again.
Right.
And that's we want to do it for this not to occur again. What did we go wrong to stop it, clean it up, and for this not to occur again?
Yeah, I mean, whenever we start our hearings, one of the things I'm going to push is that, I think it would be great if the head of, politically conservative organizations and politically liberal organizations came together and did a press conference or did a tour. And I've already started telling people this. Why can't we spend, these moments where the country and the world is watching, bringing people together that don't agree, literally don't agree hardly on anything, and bring them together on this issue that they can agree on, because that's powerful. That's powerful when you have two people that are adversaries, right? And when they stand next to each other in unison and united, supporting something, Paul, that's powerful, because people will look at that and go, wow, these 2 or 3 or 4 people don't agree on anything, but they are together, standing up there together. It's like, I'll give you an example. I mean, Bill Clinton beat the first President Bush. He beat him in the presidential election. That's how he became president. Well, after Clinton served his 8 years in the White House, and then he comes out, there is a terrible tsunami, right? I can't remember if it was in the Caribbean somewhere, and thousands of people were displaced. Many people lost their lives. It was horrible. So now you have the second President Bush. So he asks his father and Bill Clinton if they would get together and had a movement to go help bring in relief, disaster relief, to those areas that were affected by the tsunami. And here you had the first President Bush and you had Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton had beaten him in a tough campaign. They got together and they went and worked together on this. And that was so powerful. And by the way, as a result of that, and then they did it for another couple of issues, then they became really good friends. Barbara Bush, what's the first Bush? The first Lady Bush. Not Barbara. Yeah, Barbara. Barbara was the matriarch. So the first Barbara Bush, right? The first lady. It got to a point where she said, "I consider Bill Clinton like one of my sons." And the reason that all came to be was because these two guys, who obviously had disliked each other tremendously, Bill Clinton ran against Bush to kick him out of office and succeeded. Now they're working together to bring help and attention and relief to people who are in dire need. That was so powerful because people knew these guys shouldn't be liking each other, but they're working together, right? And that's what I mean, Paul, that I think today where we need to get, and I just need to push it out there more, is that we get these adversaries, people that are adversaries and high profile on different things, and have them come together and say, hey, everybody, put down the guns, pick up your pen, pick up your paper, pick up your pencil, write, or get your keyboard, type out your thoughts, or get in a debate, in a discussion. You can get up there and argue your point of view, but let's agree on this. We have to move away from trying to kill presidential candidates or trying to kill, somebody that we didn't like because of the way they looked or what their sexual orientation is or what party they're in. That's not a good reason to kill them.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that's great when you have people that have a clear conscience, as per se. But when you're driven by an ideology, and I'm glad that President Trump placed Antifa into a terrorist organization, which we're finding out more. Maybe Antifa was involved with the shooter of Kirk, as some people say. And if that happens, how can we break that ideology? With that ideology has infiltrated all colleges, and it's heavily infiltrated in Austin. How can we break that? And number one, it's a terrorist organization. How are we going to stop that ideology?
Well, you break anybody who's doing bad, as you said, that certain ideology creeps in, or attitudes, or the idea of causing harm creeps in. Well, then, you sort of push it back out. And I think, the more you unite people in opposition to those tactics, then the fewer people folks like that are going to find that want to participate in that way. I mean, look, I can give you so many examples, left, right, doesn't matter. You can get them from both sides, where you've had folks that went too far, got violent, killed, etc., attacked. And so the only way you change that is you unite. There are a lot more. This is what I believe, Paul. I believe that absolutely, and I know I'm right, that there are a lot more people in this country that do not want violence than there are who do want violence. So you unite all the people that don't want violence, because I think it's an overwhelming majority. You unite those and you start pushing back and saying, this isn't the way to go, guys. And a lot of it, starts at home with, as parents, our kids from the beginning. That's why, again, you can disagree with me. Whoever wants to disagree, they can. Part of why I wanted the 10 Commandments in those classrooms, I've said this many times, including to people that don't agree with me. I say, look, I do not believe it's going to do any bad, but I believe it will do some good. It's just a matter of how much good. But I believe it will do good. I don't think it'll do bad if a student reads every day. And at some point, they're not even going to look at it, let's face it. But at least if they read it a few times, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt honor thy parents. I mean, those are good things. And we have to push back the majority of us that are politically left, politically right, politically moderate. We agree, Paul, that violence, killing, that's not the answer. And so we have to push back so that those other people that want to push that, they have fewer and fewer people that agree with them.
You're correct. And placing that in the schools is actually something good, because, as you know, within the day, most kids are in their educational facilities between 8 to 9 hours per day. And if they're seeing that when they're actually at home with a father or mother, depending on the age gap, they say, oh, they spend a lot more time at home. Yeah, but 9 of those hours they're asleep.
Yeah.
And they basically have about a 2.5 hour window when most of it they spend with their mom. If home, a very small percentage with the father, if the father's a live-in dad. If not, it's a lot smaller, correct? But what happens is we have to place it where they spend their time the most and they get the most influence. And that's the educational departments.
No doubt about it.
We have to put a tighter grip on what they're doing.
Well, excellent point, that they're going to spend more from the time you're, I guess, from kindergarten to 12th grade. you're going to spend more time in the classroom than you're likely to ever spend with your parents, right? And so it's an excellent point that's what we hope the benefit will be, that they're going to see those things, internalize those things. I think they already know basic, right from wrong, but I think seeing that and being reminded, then, you grow up like me, and I've believed all my life. Well, I learned it. It's not like it just came to me in my mind. I learned it, that, killing people for political reasons or because of disagreements, that's not the right thing to do. I know that, and I learned it. And it's an attitude that I learned. It's one at this point that obviously I believe very strongly. But I know that I'm right when I say a great majority of Americans agree with that attitude as well, that killing is not the answer. So we have to unite and push back.
Absolutely. And just like, now we're going to go back to the hate speech, because now hate speech is something that is being heard now. Pam Bondi started with a hate speech and so on and so forth. We also have to hold our leaders accountable for the hate speech, because a lot of that hate speech was spewing out of a lot of leaders, and we have to hold them responsible, either censor them, or if they're if your colleagues on one side, whichever side of the aisle they're from, and they're talking, then that thing, they have to be censored in such a way that, guess what, you got suspended, or you're no longer here after the third time. Sorry, but we're going to vote you out, and have some type of power to stop that, because a lot of it came from those that were above, that now they're just pointing fingers. No, stop. But you guys were the ones that were causing the violence.
Well, I think, I think and hope that what more and more people that do get involved in the political discourse and the political debate, that that they can disagree with, they can look at me and say, Representative, I don't agree with you wanting to put up the 10 Commandments, and I don't agree with you because I think you're an ass, or I think you're ugly, or I think you're stupid, or I think, whatever. Hey, what good is that to characterize who I am? Talk about the issue. I'll talk about why I believe it's a certain way. It should be a certain way. You talk about it. You say, hey, I really don't think we should have him there. Here's why. And if I say, well, I don't agree with that. This is how I see it. This is how I see it. Well, you really don't have to get personal and call that person names, because once you start doing that, to your point, you start elevating the anger, the resentment, about that, between people that don't agree. And so, again, I hope that what we can do is continue to move towards a more respectful, disagree, but respectfully disagreeing. And then what I always say is, and if you're losing politically here in the Capitol on something passed that you didn't want, well, then go, hey, that's what the campaigns are for. Go campaign, go elect people that you think agree with you. That's the beauty of the political process, is that you can go out there. You can knock on doors, you can do mail, you can do TV, you can whatever, and try to get more people to agree with your point of view, to where you elect more people that agree with your point of view. That's the great equalizer. The elections are the great equalizer, not hurling, insults about how ugly somebody is, or how short they are, or how wrong they are. Just and doing it in a personal way, as opposed to saying, look, I don't agree with you. Here's why. Here's why I don't agree with you. As opposed to saying, well, you're just stupid. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. Well, no, this is what I think. You may not agree with me, but this is what I think. And we have to get it. And believe me, debates can be pretty intense debates can be very intense, Paul, without having to call somebody names, without having to, threaten them, or say, oh, you keep that up and you're going to get, you're going to get what you got coming, right? You don't have to go down that road. It can get pretty intense just by being intellectual about it, or common sense about it, laying out your positions, why you feel a certain way. You can do all that without having to incite people to a point where they want to go cause harm.
Absolutely. And you said something there, in reference to social media. a lot of people, since they're not talking face to face, they're just talking to a computer screen. You don't have the reactions of what's going on. So it's a lot easier for somebody to call somebody whatever, because they're not facing them face to face. They, so threats are made, names are called, blah blah blah, continues because they're not facing them. Sometimes they're not even friends with them. They're answering on a thread that somebody else put in there that people don't even know each other, and they start arguing over this. But once the threats come of age, people need to understand and take them as such. A couple of years ago, there was a good friend of ours was running for office, and we had found out that there was some issues with the dog pound here in Laredo, and everybody did we started doing a food drive for the dogs. I did it out of our school, and this other individual did it out of his business, and we're just doing it. We had nothing to do with each other. We're doing it on our own, trying to help out the situation that was going on. And I remember very, very well, some girl just posted out in this one watchdog group that used to be very prevalent in Laredo on Facebook. And she says, I know all your all's faces. And when we see you all enter our restaurant, I'm going to put Drano in your all's drinks.
Holy cow.
And I said to myself, oh shit, so everybody, did you hear what, everybody messaged each other, and one of them made a police report, and the police officer basically said, oh, it's just internet talk. Well, that's a threat. That's, if this person did this, we better come out and basically, maybe that person needs help. Maybe she needs some counseling. But if you're going to go say you're a waitress and you're working at a restaurant, and you're just, when you see somebody that you got discord from, you're going to put Drano in their drink. So we have to understand what's a threat and what's not a threat. And the police at that time frame were not taking it as such. But now, with the times have changed, now it's kind of like, oh, I think we should be taking these threats on social media as a threat. It's not.
Yeah. That's horrible, dude. You hadn't told me that story. That's terrible. Holy cow, man.
It happened probably 2018 on that time.
Bro, I mean, you got me thinking. Whenever I go to a restaurant, I would say, hey, do you have bottled water? And give me a bottle. Don't open it. I'll open it. Yeah. Because I mean, I hadn't even thought of that, man. I hadn't even thought of that. Wow. Damn. Yeah. Well,
they all came out, and they basically just.
No, that's a real threat. That's a real threat, and that should be dealt with, in my opinion. I mean, that's just terrible. But anyway, all right, I got a couple other things I got to do here. We could wrap up. I got to get on another conference call here in a few minutes.
No, big one. Thank you for standing up and being a champion of what you're doing, and good luck with any which way we can help.
Well, once we start the hearings, if you want, when we start the hearings, I could come back and give you a kind of update you on a report on how things are going, just to keep you in the loop.
Absolutely. We'll this, folks. Hope you all enjoyed with our state representative here, and we'll leave you with this. Y'all be safe, stay safe, and God bless you. Until next time, much peace.
Take care, Paul. Thank you, brother.
Have you ever wondered about what happens in a martial arts studio? Well, you start right away by setting goals, building determination, gaining focus, building skills, all while becoming more fit, gaining confidence, and learning self-defense. Buitron Academy is a school where attitude meets aptitude. So give us a call at 956-401-4868.